Hello, hello, subscribers out there. I am an hour late, and I am so sorry. For an hour and a half, I've been fighting with Streamlabs. It's been going on for a while now, so I finally had to just uninstall everything and reinstall it to get it to even work. I think the firewalls are working against me. Well, I owe you a few tucking and chills. And, well, I know this is a little strange, but I cannot make this new uploaded Streamlabs take my VTube Studio and fit it into the screen properly. So I guess while I'm using this in PC mode, people on their smartphones might be able to get a better view. I don't know. I'm really sorry. But I really thought it was important for you to see all the stuff that's around me on the floor in this little tower. And I chose this to be the background because the story I'm going to tell you today isn't something that I could really picture how to make the visuals for. So instead of cutting screen today, I'm going to be just telling you a story and hoping that as you hear some things, you kind of look around this little tower, these tiny windows. Imagine I'm in some kind of a turret. Possibly a very old-fashioned ancient lighthouse. I'll let you decide. Because today, if we look up above here at this ancient monolith carving, well, we're going to read a story about H.P. Lovecraft. He's the master of weird fiction. He's the guy that introduced us to his discovery of an ancient god out there called Cthulhu. May he find your house last. And in this story tonight for Tuckin' and Chill, H.P. Lovecraft has something unusual to say. In a story he wrote, which is in the public domain, it's called Dagon. Strangely enough, when I'm looking at it backwards, it kind of looks like no Gad. Interesting. Well, here we are, and we'll just pretend that I'm the main character telling you the story. And I'm currently looking around the room. Oh, here we go. I've got this book down here, too. See over there by my foot? Pointing to it. That book there. I'm writing this under an appreciable mental strain, since by tonight I shall be no more. Penniless, and at the end of my supply of the drug which alone makes my life endurable, I can bear the torture no longer, and shall cast myself from the garret window into the squalid street below. Do not think from my slavery to morphine that I am a weakling or a degenerate. When you've read these hastily scrawled pages, you may guess, though never fully realize, why it is that I must have forgetfulness or death. It was in one of the most open and least frequented parts of the Pacific that the packet of which I was supercargo fell a victim to the German sea raider. The Great War was then at its very beginning, and the enemy's navy had not reached its degree of ruthlessness, so that our vessel was made legitimate prize, whilst we, her crew, were treated with all the fairness and consideration due us as naval prisoners. So liberal, indeed, was the discipline of our captors that 5 days after we were taken, I managed to escape alone in a small boat with water and provisions for a good length of time. When I finally found myself adrift and free, I had but little idea of my surroundings. Never a competent navigator, I could only guess vaguely by the sun and stars that I was somewhat south of the equator. Of the longitude I knew nothing. No island or coastline was in sight. The weather kept fair, and for uncounted days I drifted aimlessly beneath the scorching sun, waiting either for some passing ship or to be cast on the shores of some inhabitable land. But neither ship nor land appeared, and I began to despair in my solitude upon the heaving vastness of that unbroken blue. am still having technical difficulties. Being told to wait, here we go. The change happened whilst I slept. Its details I shall never know, for my slumber, though troubled and dream-infested, was continuous. When at last I awaked, it was to discover myself half sucked into a slimy expanse of hellish black mire, which extended about me in monotonous undulations as far as I could see, and in which my boat lay grounded some distance away. Though one might well imagine that my first sensation would be of wonder, so prodigious and unexpected a transformation of scenery, I was in reality more horrified than astonished, for there was in the air and in the rotting soil a sinister quality which chilled me to the very core. The region was putrid with the carcasses of decaying fish and of other less describable things which I saw protruding from the nasty mud of the unending plain. Perhaps I should not hope to convey in mere words the unutterable hideousness that can dwell in absolute silence and barren immensity. There was nothing within hearing, and nothing in sight, save a vast reach of black slime. Yet the very completeness of the stillness and homogeneity of the landscape oppressed me with a nauseating fear. The sun was blazing down from the sky, which seemed to me almost black in its cloudless cruelty, as though reflecting the inky marsh beneath my feet. As I crawled into the stranded boat, I realized that only one theory could explain my position. Through some unprecedented volcanic upheaval, a portion of the ocean floor must have been thrown to the surface, exposing regions which far innumerably millions of years had lain hidden from unfathomable watery depths. Oh, so great was the extent of the new land which had risen beneath me that I could not detect the faintest noise of the surging ocean, strain my ears as I might, nor were there any sea-fowl to prey upon the dead things. For several hours I sat thinking or brooding in the boat, which lay upon its side and afforded a slight shade in the sun moving across the heavens. As the day progressed, the ground lost some of the stickiness and seemed likely to dry sufficiently for traveling purposes in a short time. Hi, Mr. Katoon. I'm so glad you made it. We have just been stranded and our boat's been tossed aside, and I've got my backpack, just less 1 penny to my name, and I've been writing in this book about what I've been going through. I found myself, as the day progressed, the ground lost some of the stickiness, and that night I slept but little, and the next day I made for myself a pack containing food and water. It's over here, preparatory to an overland journey in search of the vanished sea and a possible rescue. On the third morning I found the soil dry enough to walk upon with ease. The odor of the fish was maddening, but I was too much concerned with graver things to mind so slight an evil, and I set out boldly for an unknown goal. All day I forged steadily westward, guided by a faraway hammock which rose higher than any other elevation on the rolling desert. That night I camped, and on the following day still traveled toward the hummock, though that object seemed scarcely nearer than when I had first spied it. By the fourth evening, I attained the base of the mound, which turned out to be much higher than it had appeared from a distance, an intervening valley setting out in sharper relief from the general surface. Too weary to ascend, I slept in the shadow of the hill. I know not why my dreams were so wild that night, but before the waning and fantastically gibbous moon had risen far above the eastern plain, I was awake in a cold perspiration, determined to sleep no more. Such visions as I had experienced were too much for me to endure again, and in the glow of the moon I saw how unwise I had been to travel by day. Without the glare of the parching sun, my journey would have cost me less energy, Indeed, I now felt quite able to perform the ascent which had deterred me at sunset. Picking up my pack, I started for the crest of the eminence. I have said that the unbroken monotony of the rolling plain was a source of vague horror to me, but I think my horror was greater when I gained the summit of the mound and looked down the other side into an immeasurable pit or canyon, whose black recesses the moon had not yet soared high enough to illume. I felt myself on the edge of the world, peering over the rim of that fathomless chaos of eternal night. Through my terror ran curious reminiscence of Paradise Lost and of Satan's hideous climb through the unfashionable realms of darkness. As the moon climbed higher in the sky, I began to see the slopes of the valley were not quite so perpendicular as I had imagined. Legends and outcroppings of rock afforded fairly easy footholds for a descent. But after a drop of a few hundred feet, the declivity became very gradual. Urged on by an impulse which I cannot definitely analyze, I scrambled with difficulty down the rocks, and I stood on the gentler slope beneath, gazing into the Stygian deeps, where no light had yet penetrated. All at once my attention was captured by a vast and singular object. On the opposite slope, which rose steeply about 100 yards ahead of me, an object that gleamed whitely in the newly bestowed rays of that ascending moon. That it was merely a gigantic piece of stone, I soon assured myself, but I was conscious of a distinct impression that its contour and position were not altogether the work of nature. He added up there. A closer scrutiny filled me with sensations I cannot express, for despite its enormous magnitude and its location in an abyss which had yawned at the bottom of the sea since the world was young, I perceived beyond a doubt that the strange object was a well-shaped monolith whose massive bulk had known the workmanship and perhaps the worship of living and thinking creatures. Take a look at it up there. What do you think that is? Dazed and frightened, yet not without a certain thrill of the scientist or archaeologist's delight, I examined my surroundings more closely. The moon, now near the zenith, shone weirdly and vividly above the towering steeps that hemmed in the chasm, and revealed the fact that a far-flung body of water flowed at the bottom, winding out of sight in both directions, and almost lapping at my feet as soon as I stood on the slope. Across the chasm, the wavelets washed the base of the Cyclopean monolith, on whose surface I could now trace both inscriptions and crude sculptures. The writing was in a system of hieroglyphics known to me, and unlike anything I had ever seen in books, consisting for the most part of conventionalized aquatic symbols such as fishes, eels, octopi, crustaceans, mollusks, whales, and the like. Several characters obviously represented marine things which are unknown to the modern world, but whose decomposing forms I had observed in the ocean-risen plain. It was the pictorial carving, however, that did most to hold me spellbound. Plainly, visibly across the intervening water, on account of their enormous size, were an array of bas-reliefs, whose subjects would have excited the envy of a Doré. I think that these things were supposed to depict men, at least a certain sort of men, though the creatures were shown disporting like fishes in waters of some marine grotto, or paying homage at some monolith shrine which appeared to be under the waves as well. Of their faces and forms I dare not speak in detail, for the mere remembrance makes me grow faint. Grotesque beyond the imagination of a Poe or a Bulwer, they were damnably human in general outline, despite webbed hands and webbed feet, shockingly wide and flabby lips, glassy bulging eyes, and other features less pleasant to recall. Curiously enough, they seemed to have been chiseled badly out of a proportion of a scenic background, for one of the creatures was shown in the act of killing a whale, represented as but little larger than himself. I remarked, as I say, their grotesqueness and strange size, but in a moment decided that they were merely the imaginary gods of some primitive fishing or seafaring tribe. Some tribe whose last descendant had perished eras before the first ancestors of the Piltdown or the Neanderthal man was born. Awestruck at this unexpected glimpse into a past beyond the conception of the most staring anthropologist, I stood musing whilst the moon cast queer reflections on the silent channel in front of me. Then suddenly I saw it, with only a slight churning to mark its rise to the surface. The thing slid into view above the dark waters. Vast, Polyphemus-like, and loathsome, it darted like a stupendous monster of nightmares to the monolith, about which it flung its gigantic scaly arms, while it bowed its hideous head and gave vent to certain measured sounds. I think I went mad then. Of my frantic ascent to the sloping cliff and my delirious journey back to the stranded boat, I remember little. I believe I sang a great deal, and laughed oddly when I was unable to sing. I have indistinct recollections of a great storm some time after I reached the boat. At any rate, I know that I heard pearls of thunder and other tones which nature utters only in her wildest moods. When I came out of the shadows, I was in a San Francisco hospital, brought thither by the captain of the American ship which had picked up my boat in mid-ocean. In my delirium I had said much, but found that my words had been given scant attention. Of any land upheaval in the Pacific, my rescuers knew nothing, nor did I deem it necessary to insist upon a thing which I knew that they couldn't believe. Once I sought out a celebrated ethnologist, and amused him with the peculiar questions regarding the ancient Philistine legend of Dagon, the fish god. You know, Cthulhu? But soon perceiving that he was hopelessly conventional, I did not press my inquiries. It is at night, especially when the moon is gibbous and waning, that I see the thing. I tried morphine, but the drug has given only transient surcease, and has drawn me into its clutches as a hopeless slave. So now I'm going to end matters, having written a full account of the information or the contemptuous amusement of my fellow men. It's right here in this book. I put it all there. Often I ask myself if I could not all have been a pure phantasm, a mere freak of fever that I lay sunstruck and raving in the open boat in my escape from the German man-of-war. But this I ask myself. But ever does there come before me a hideous vivid vision in reply. I cannot think of the deep sea without shuddering at the nameless things that may at this very moment be crawling and floundering on its slimy bed, worshipping their ancient stone idols, like that one up there, and carving their own detestable likenesses on submarine obelisks of water-soaked granite. I dream of a day when they may rise above the billows to drag down in their reeking talons the remnants of puny war-exhausted mankind. Of a day when the land shall sink, and the dark ocean floor shall ascend amidst universal pandemonium. The end is near. I hear a noise at the door, as if something immense slippery body lumbering against it. It shall not find me. God, that hand! The window. The window. Welcome, Mr. Catan. Let me get up close to talk to you. So this was one of the first stories introducing Cthulhu to the world. Maybe I'll do this. Kind of looks interesting. Huh. Well, what did you think of our story so far? There is another written by Mr. Lovecraft, but that's all we have for today. I know I do owe another, so maybe I'll pop in a guild meeting this week to tell you the next story of Dagon. Or you may know him as Cthulhu, and I do so ever wish that he finds your house last. Now, Rank 10, are you there studying tonight? Or are you getting ready to go out and have some fun? Let's see, can I do this? Let's just extend the view outward now. We can get close up now. Dun 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 dun. Dun, 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 dun. There we go. Now we're up nice and close and personal. Haha. So this is my little castle turret. I like to imagine it's above our underground lair in the ruins, where we have our guild meetings. You're heading off to bed now? I'm so glad you were able to get in and hear most of the story. What did you think of this one? My background's just a little different than usual, but I thought we needed some new scenery. So how did your exams go anyways? So today, I've run out of all beverages and ice cubes. So what you're hearing me eat is a Pedialyte. It's an electrolyte freezy. They're not as tasty as the sugar-filled, bad, unhealthy freezy snacks out there with the sugar water. But it's got the electrolytes in it. And I bought them as an emergency snack, but since I'm always feeling dehydrated, and since I'm out of regular store-bought water because I don't trust the tap water that comes into this building, I'm having Pedialyte freezies today. So I'm going to lift my Pedialyte freezy to your health and mine. Oh, now, Mr. Catan, if you do not like Lovecraft, and I didn't know that, then I won't read it to you next time. I definitely have other stories that I've collected. Let me see here. I'm just going to make a note. Then I've made a note. Ryan no likey. So that's not what I'm going to read now. You know what? So, Mr. Catan, are you trying to fall asleep right now? Because I can find another story. I've got a whole bunch here. They're kind of longer than this one. There's the picture in the house. Oh, no, that's Lovecraft. Never mind. Hang on. What did I do here? What else do I have? I got more. I've got The Murdered Cousin by Sheridan Le Fanu, made in 1851. It's a long one. And I also have, let me see what this is. The Petting Zoo, Ellsworth's famous spider petting zoo, open year-round, all visitors welcome. By Peter de Neverville. And I haven't done these ones yet at all. Or I have Edgar Allan Poe, The Pit and the Pendulum. That's a long one too. Do any of those three maybe strike your interest while I help you fall asleep? Okay, I don't know if you're here, if you're there, we have a lag. But Mr. Cassandra, if you would like, I could read Edgar Allan Poe, The Pit and the Pendulum, or I can read The Petting Zoo, or I can read The Murdered Cousin. Would you like to hear one of those? It's The Spider Petting Zoo by Peter de Niverville. Or, let's see, The Murdered Cousin by Sheridan Le Fanu. The second one, The Petting Zoo. I don't have The Goodnight Moon here. I have to be sure that if I'm reading something is from the public domain. Is that in the public domain? So Peter de Niverville, The Petting Zoo. Okay, I'm gonna make this a different color. Petting Zoo. Okay, I'm just fixing something up. The weird sounds you're hearing are me trying to eat the Pedialyte. Frozen, freezy, made of electrolyte beverage. I don't know what it is. It's green. Unlike any shade of green, it's an ugly green too. I can't tell you what the flavor is. I don't know if it's meant to be like apple or I don't know. Sounds so bad. Okay. All right, here we go. All right, here we go. To help Mr. Ryan Catan fall asleep, we're gonna read The Petting Zoo. And it's okay if I just stay close up like this. I don't have time to do other stuff. Let me do this. I want to get rid of Cthulhu. Just gonna bring me down here a little. Pardon my boobs. Here we are. All right, and I think maybe I'll just get cozy with you. Let me just get my blanket. Oh, here we go. You're gonna get ready for bed with me. Let's find our blankets. Let's do a Christmas blanket. Why not? There now. Now we're comfy. There we go. Okay, Mr. Catan. This story is from the public domain. It's by Peter de Niverville. It's The Petting Zoo. And for anyone out there who has to read this for school, well, now you can close your eyes, lay back, and have a listen. Pedialyte. It's not so yummy, but it works. At first, Johnson thought it was a joke. Speeding down the country road and crude sign was only a blur, but it was that one word, slowing down. He swung the Lexus onto the paved shoulder. In the rearview mirror, he could see clearly. The sign was tacked to a stick that was stuck in the ground, just beyond the paved shoulder. Shifting the power car into reverse, Johnson jammed the accelerator down. The tire squealed and loose gravel flew as he tore back up this road. Screeching to a halt, Johnson stared at the faded handwriting. Ellsworth's famous spider-petting zoo, 5 miles next right. Spiders fascinated Johnson. One summer, when he was 8, a large golden black spider had taken up residence underneath the shingles up by the back door. Every morning, Johnson would gather up ants in a jar from a nest in the scrubby woods behind his house. One by one, he would drop the wriggling insects into the web. Salutations, Hero Flame. We're getting started. Let's tuck in and chill as I read The Petting Zoo. With lightning speed, the spider would spring from her hiding place and race towards the victim. Sinking her fans into the ant, she would retreat, waiting for the poison to take effect. When the ant slowly stopped struggling, she would climb back down and delicately wrap her prey in a white shroud. This continued until one day his mother caught him. "What a cruel little boy you are," she scolded between clenched teeth as she pummeled his backside. He could still feel the shame of being spanked. Years later, in a rare moment of remorse, Johnson wondered what it was like for the ant, trapped, helpless, waiting for the spider to return. Did they know fear or horror? Or was that something only humans experienced? The insect brain was too small, he told himself, or so he hoped. Thank you very much, Hero Flame. I'd like to say you look lovely too, but I know for sure you sound it. 5 miles, thought Johnson. This side trip might only add another half hour or so to his journey. He would still have time once he got to his motel to have a shower. The dinner meeting was with the buyer from the supermarket chain wasn't until 6 o'clock, and it was only 4 now. Coasting forward, Johnson scanned the road looking for the turnoff. About 100 yards ahead, he saw a lane that intersected with the highway. Flicking on his turn signal, he shot a quick glance to his watch. "If I don't find it in 15 minutes, he promised himself, I'll turn back." Accelerating smoothly, he turned into a well-paved secondary road and deep ditches on either side. Punching the buttons in the CD player, he stretched his arms, settling back into the soft leather seat. As a throb beat of the Queen filled the Lexus, his mood lightened. An unexpected adventure in an otherwise boring day. Johnson hated his job. Endless meetings with bad food and bawling buyers, too many drinks and too many hangovers. He was packing on the pounds, too. "I have to get back to the gym," he reminded himself. The only redeeming feature of his job was that he was good at it. "Top sales rep for the last 3 years. I should have been an actor," he told himself. "Instead, I'm selling toilet paper and tampons to these turkeys." As the needle in the speedometer crept higher and higher, he neatly kept fields and freshly painted houses became a blur. Mile after mile slipped by. Johnson felt that he had, and the car had become one, soaring along like a hawk on a summer breeze. But his mood soon soured. The condition of the road deteriorated. Asphalt gave way to chipped steel, which gave way to gravel, and finally ended up as dirt. Johnson jumped up on the brakes, and a huge pothole emerged in the center of the road. Cursing the delay, he checked his watch again. It was almost 5. The long drive down the country road had dulled his senses of time. "I better turn around," he cautioned himself. As he studied the road ahead, looking for a safe place to make a U-turn, he saw it, an old farmhouse set back from the road. If it hadn't been for the pothole, he would have missed it completely. By the mailbox, a freshly painted sign, and it read, "Ellsworth's famous spider petting zoo, open year-round, all visitors welcome." If you're feeling that you're gonna fall asleep, don't fight the journey. take the ride. This must be the place, he concluded, carefully turning up the heavily rutted lane. Johnson wondered what he would find. Perhaps one of the locals playing a joke on the tourists. He mused. Tall grass lapped at the bottom of the car, and rusted barbed wire clung to rotted posts that ran alongside the lane. In the untilled field, scrubby bushes sprung up like mushrooms. Johnson tried to imagine what the farm looked like in better days, but it was impossible. When he reached the top of the hill, the farmhouse looked even more decrepit. Blistered paint hung from the wooden shingles. There was a disturbing sag in the middle of the roof. What once had been the side garden was now occupied by tall thistles, and a mass of tangled timbers indicated the former site of the main barn. Except for the glass still intact in the windows, the house looked abandoned. Where was everybody? Thought Johnson. In response to his question, an old woman dressed in a black skirt and a woolen sweater stepped out the side door. She was gnarled and withered like the lone apple tree that stood in the yard. Johnson guessed she must have been at least 70, maybe even 80 years old. "What you want?" she spat. Turning off the CD player and rolling down the car window, he replied, "Is this a petting zoo?" "That's what the sign says, don't it?" Ignoring her rudeness, Johnson continued, "Are you open?" "Yeah, look at Jake. He out back chopping wood." He watched as she shuffled down a dirt path and disappeared around a corner of the house. Charming, thought Johnson. Opening the car door, he stepped out. Despite the poverty, the farm had a certain rustic appeal, which reminded him of the house that he grew up in the country. But there was something odd, something missing. Where are the flies? Thought Johnson. On most farms, the low buzz of the black swarms were constant, but here there were none, except for the moaning of the wind. It was quiet. Glancing at his watch, he frowned. It was after 5 o'clock. If he did not get back on the road soon, he'd be late for his appointment. Either that or skip his shower. All the driving all day, Johnson did not want to skip a soothing ritual. Taking one last look around, he reached for the handle of the car door. Just then the old woman reappeared, and behind her, even more wizened up, an old man wearing faded blue overalls and a nicotine-stained undershirt. Stopping at the corner of the house, the old man spat out a long jet of chewing tobacco onto the ground. Wiping his mouth with the back of his hand, he paused momentarily to study Johnson. Speaking to the old woman, he said in a low tone, "Thought I heard a car come up." "Wants to see your spiders," she said, before she turned away and went back into the farmhouse, letting the screen door slam behind her. "You want to see my spiders, young fella?" "Sure, if you're open. How much?" Looking over the Lexus, he scratched his ruddy face and said, $50. "50? That's ridiculous." Shrugging his shoulders, the old man said, "Take it or leave it. I got work to do." Then he spat out another long jet of chewing tobacco, and he turned to go. I can't leave now after coming all this way, thought Johnson. Taking another quick glance at the watch, he said irritably, all right, but this better be good." The old man smirked, licked his lips, and Johnson whipped out a crispy $50 bill from his wallet. Johnson did not like the old man's greedy look, and hastily shoved his wallet back in his pants pocket. "Thanks," said the old man sarcastically, snatching the bill from Johnson's hand. Looking it over carefully, he folded it up neatly, stuck it in his pocket, and said, "Follow me." The old man led Johnson down an overgrown path to a shed at the back of the farmhouse. Inside, the dim glow of fluorescent tubes highlighted the dozen plywood shelves that ran along the walls. In contrast to the rest of the farm, the shed was neat, almost antiseptic in appearance. Sitting on each shelf was a glass terrarium filled with twigs and rocks. In the case closest to Johnson, a small garden spider was spinning a web in the corner. "That's an orb spider," said the old man. "I know," said Johnson, annoyed by the interruption. "You know spiders?" "A bit," replied Johnson. "I used to study them when I was a kid." "I bet you're the type that liked to free 'em, eh? Catch bugs, drop 'em in, see what happened? Fun, ain't it? Suddenly Johnson was uncomfortable. How did he guess my secret? He wondered. Johnson felt the warm rush of blood to his neck and his ears, and he started to blush. No need to be ashamed, young fella. All kids do it. It's natural. Trying to change the topic, Johnson asked, you been doing this long? Keeping spiders? Yeah, I've been a while. Most folks are scared of spiders. Not me. Me and spiders get along real good. One second here. All the clicking that you hear is me trying to see what I'm doing. Looking closer, looking closer. Johnson turned back to watch a large black spider in another case sucking up the half-digested slurry of its latest victim. Trying to be polite, Johnson asked, Bet you don't get many visitors here, being so far from the highway? Don't need 'em, said the old man. This is just a sideline. Pausing for effect, he added, I breed 'em. Johnson looked puzzled. For the college? Explained the old man. They use 'em for research. Does it pay well? Good enough. They don't know squat about spiders, said the old man, spitting on the floor. Johnson looked down and saw that a streak of the sticky black tobacco had splashed on his shoes. Man, I've been doing research of my own, said the old man proudly. Spiders are just like any other critter. Cows, horses, dogs, they're all the same. Breed the best with the best, and you get the best, or the... The old man's voice trailed off as he started to laugh. There was something about his tone that made Johnson uneasy. You want to see my prize winner? Johnson looked around. She ain't here. I keep her in the barn. She kind of makes the other critters nervous. I can't say I blame 'em. Want to see her? The way the old man said it, the question sounded more like a challenge. Johnson hesitated. He wanted to say no, but he could not let the old man see he was afraid. Sure, answered Johnson. What could it be? He asked himself. A tarantula? With the old man in front, they went down a lesser-used path to a small barn behind a stand of trees that made it invisible from the farmhouse. A shiny new lock on a rusted old clasp yielded to the old man's key. I don't like kids messing with my stuff. The ancient wooden door swung open. Inside it was pitch black. Johnson hesitated. What was it that made him apprehensive? His mouth felt dry and he tried to swallow. Go on in, taunted the old man as he shoved Johnson through the door. Stumbling on the raised sill, Johnson fell to one knee, ripping his pants. Damn it, he cursed. There's a light switch ahead of you, the old man reassured him. Just pull the string. The stench of moldy hay made Johnson gag. Where is it? The spider, he called out. She's in the back. You can't miss her. Where's the light? Right in front of you. Can't you see it? Mocked the old man. Johnson stretched out his hand. At first, he could not feel anything. Then slowly, groping the air in, he caught hold of it. Johnson's heart leapt in relief, but there was something strange. The line didn't feel like string. It was sticky like Pulling the line, Johnson knew he had made a mistake. Something rustled in the rafters above him, and bits of straw floated down. Johnson bolted from the opening. Enjoy yourself, cackled the old man as he slammed the door and locked it. Let me out! Let me out! Shouted Johnson, pounding on the door. Let me out, you old buzzard! But it was no use. The dried-out wooden door like iron. Pausing to catch his breath, his fist throbbed. Johnson looked around. Slowly, his eyes grew accustomed to the dark. What appeared to be a black chasm was, in fact, the side entrance to the barn. There must be another way out, he thought. But where? In the gloom, he could see that beyond the entryway there was a large open space, and beyond that a boarded-up window through which the thin shafts of sunlight streamed. Great. All I have to do is cross the barn, pull off one or two of those boards, and climb out, thought Johnson. Then I'll show that old man $50. He wishes I'd never stopped. Then he heard another rustle overhead, and more straw floated down. Who is it? Who's there? He called out. I'll bet it's that old man, thought Johnson. He thinks he's going to scare me. Sure, you just keep that up, old man, Johnson called out again. Let's see how much laughing you do when I bash your face in. First, I've got to get to that window. Be careful, he cautioned himself. This barn must be full of junk. Don't want to fall down and get hurt. Despite the heat in the barn, he shivered. Licking the sweat off his upper lip, Johnson slowly picked his way across the wide, wooden-planked barn floor, being careful not to trip. Shadows of old machinery and tools loomed around him. A leather harness that hung from the wall looked like a hangman's noose. There was a peculiar smell, too. It reminded him of a package of chicken that he once left in the trunk of his car on a hot summer day. It was the sickly, sweet scent of rotting meat. Oh, gross, muttered Johnson. There's a dead animal in here. In less than a minute he crossed the barn and was standing in front of the boarded-up window. Blocking his exit, there were 3 boards nailed haphazardly onto the frame. Either the old man was too weak or too lazy to drive them all the way in, concluded Johnson. I can probably pull them off with my bare hands. He smiled triumphantly. The first board was half rotted and fell apart in his hands. Light streamed in as it came away from the frame. Then he shifted his attention to the second one, the board in the middle. If he could get this one off, he could easily climb out. But the board wouldn't be so easy. It was like the old door of the barn, dried out and as tough as steel. Gripping the board with both hands, he began pulling. The nails squealed in and protected the board. It started to move, but only a little bit further. Grunted Johnson. The thought of throttling that old man excited him. Just a bit further. Another half-inch. He could almost feel his fingers closing around the old man's scrawny neck, the eyes bulging, the tongue sticking out. Another half-inch. Then it stopped. Desperately, Johnson yanked at the board, but it was no use. It would not yield. I need more leverage, he said to himself. Balancing on one foot, he braced his other against the window frame and started pulling again. The muscles in his forearms had back bulged, and he strained against the board. Sweat rolled down his forehead and into his eyes. Come on, he pleaded into the wood. Come on! In his frustration, Johnson did not hear the soft tap, tap, tap on the floor behind him. Tap, 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 like a blind man with his cane. Tap, tap, tap. Then it was too late. It struck. The force of the attack rammed him face first up against the wall, knocking the wind out of him. Warm blood trickled from his nose and ran down his cheek. What was that? Turning around slowly, he could see, in the light from the window, his attacker. It was crouched inside an empty stall along the opposite wall, the legs tense, ready to spring. It was a spider. No doubt one of the old man's experiments, but this was no ordinary spider. It was huge, about the size of a pit bull. The legs had extended out 3 or 4 feet on either side. Its eyes stared coldly at him. Johnson did a quick tally of his injuries. Except for his bloody nose, he was unharmed. Perhaps the large size of the creature made it difficult for it to mount an attack, he conjectured. Possibly it did not even recognize him as prey. Spiders normally eat moths and insects, he reminded himself, not human beings. When he was a kid, Johnson liked to throw twigs into a web just to see the spider's reaction. Invariably, after pouncing on the object, the spider would pluck it out of the web, turn it over, and drop it to the ground. Johnson hoped the spider would show the same lack of interest. From its vantage point on the other end of the barn, the creature seemed puzzled, unsure of itself. Spiders are cautious, he told himself. It's waiting for me to make the next move. Although every fiber in his body screamed run, his brain told him to stay still. The spider was too big and too fast to outrun it. I need a weapon, he told himself. Quickly looking about, he saw the rotten board from the window lying at his feet. It was about 2 feet long, with a jagged point at one end. It'll have to do. Slowly, he bent down to pick it up. The spider crouched low, like a sprinter, ready to strike again. Johnson froze, his fingers only inches from the board. "Easy, girl," he whispered softly. "Easy." The spider relaxed, but not completely. Deliberately it began to move forward. Tap, tap, tap. Johnson was amazed by the creature's grace, like a ballerina tiptoeing in from the dark wings of a theater. It was a marvel of beauty and design. The body, covered by fine gray hair, had the look of velvet, while the 8 legs that extended from the thorax providing speed and balance. As it approached Johnson, the spider carefully extended one foreleg towards him. Johnson quickly knocked it away with his hand. The creature stopped and cocked its plate-sized head to one side. The 8 eyes looked like black fists. Then the leg came forward again. At the tip, Johnson could see the spike-like claw for catching prey. It touched his left shoulder. Through his jacket, he could feel the sharp point digging into his skin. Johnson winced and stepped backward into the wall. There was no place to go. Slowly, the other foreleg came forward. Johnson recoiled, trying to ward off the attack with his free arm, but the creature was too strong. He brushed his arm aside as if it was a piece of lint, and it planted a second claw into the other shoulder. Johnson cried out, "Help! Help!" Then the spider reared up on its hind legs, forcing Johnson to his knees. For a brief moment he and the creature looked into each other's eyes. It was almost like love. Then he saw the 6-inch fangs that extended from the head. Drops of venom gleamed in the half-light. He watched in fascination as the cruel daggers arched high over him. Then he screamed as they plunged deeply into his chest. Instantly, white-hot pain ripped through his body. Then it was gone. The spider had retreated back to the stall. Johnson knew that he had only a minute or two before the poison paralyzed him. "This is it," he said to himself. "My only chance." Ignoring his wounds, Johnson turned back to the window. Grabbing the last board, he yanked and pulled to no avail. Already the venom was having its effect. His hands were numb and his arms felt like lead. Gasping for air, he threw himself at the boards again and again, but it was no use. He was beaten. Great sobs shook his body and he slumped to the floor. "This can't be happening to me," he protested. "It's ridiculous." Looking back at the spider, he could see that it still had not moved. "What is she waiting for?" he wondered. "Why doesn't she finish me off?" He soon had his answer. Shimmering like a great overcoat, there was something on the spider's back. It moved and undulated like a small wave flowing back and forth. Then a piece of the wave pulled away and dropped to the floor. It was another spider, only a lot smaller, about the size of a rat. Johnson recalled that some spiders carry their young on their backs. Horrified, he realized he had stumbled into their nursery, and it was feeding time. Another one dropped to the floor, and another. Soon there was a long line of spiders slowly crawling towards him. Through faded eyesight, he saw the first one reach his foot. Tentatively, its foreleg probed the air until it found his leg and patted it. It was light and delicate, like the touch of a child. Johnson opened his mouth to scream, but no sound came. The last thing Johnson saw before he lost consciousness was a spider tearing a piece of flesh from the back of his hand. Back at the farmhouse, the old man picked up a whiskey bottle from the kitchen table, poured himself another drink, and plopped down on the ancient lazy-boy recliner. "How long it take, Jake?" asked the old woman. "Not long," he grunted. "They ain't eaten since Sunday." "Get a better sign. Attract my folks." "Nah, the sign's okay. Anyway, we don't need a crowd," said the old man, taking a long, hard swallow. "What you gonna do with this car?" she asked, standing at the window admiring the now ownerless Lexus. "I hear young Dougal needs one for running moonshine. Willing to pay a good price, too," said the old man. "Won't he ask questions?" wondered the old woman, pouring a drink and easing herself down onto a dusty couch. "Nah, he don't care," snickered the old man. "I'll talk to him tomorrow. Meanwhile, pass the remote. Let's watch Dr. Phil." Ew, so gross. Do. And that is the story of the petting zoo. Oh my. That's making me even feel more creepy about having spiders. Good thing I haven't seen one in a while. So gross. I feel so sad for the man. Now, hopefully you've all fallen asleep. At least I hope I've given you a good show after sleeping through tuck-in and chill nights for the past couple of weeks. I don't know how I feel about this story. I'm really sad for the character. Really, really gross. Just writing down. I hope Mr. Ryan Catan really did fall asleep, and if Hero Flame is still out there, are you also sleeping? If not, let me know. If you are, I'll let you go. Well, that was a really gross story, everybody. But I hope you found it entertaining. Da 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 da. Well, I think my subscribers who popped in tonight have fallen asleep, and that means my job has been done with success. 2 different stories. Both of them kind of sad. Both of them kind of gross. Just a little bit. I shouldn't laugh. Please never get yourself stuck in a spider's web. I guess that's all I can tell you. And you're just gonna hear the ASMR experience for the evening. I'm taking the stories that I've just read out to my sleepy fan base and making them a different background color so I know not to go back to these pages for our next show. I'm glad I had the chance to share too, actually, since I owe you guys. I think I owe you guys a few more than that, but at least it's a good start. We know now not to tell you stories by Lovecraft. Not when Ryan's listening anyhow. I'll save those for when he's out and about in the real world. Although the first story was good for Hero Flame because Hero likes stories by the water. So I hope, Hero, if you're still out there, you come back and check out the first half of tonight's edition of Tuck-In and Chill, because that first story was for you. The second story, by request of Mr. Catan. And actually, I will tell you this honestly, I think people spitting tobacco is the grossest thing, and even just saying this, I feel like I'm about to vomit, and I felt like I was going to vomit while I was reading about it. I just didn't want to picture that at all. It's so gross. So gross. I'm still feeling bad for the guy in the story. What a horrible way to go. It looks like I have been a success and I have put my listeners to sleep. If you're popping in, at a later time because you're in another time zone, I hope you also enjoy this edition of Tuck In and Chill. No ghost stories tonight. I will just wish you holiday spirit. Take care, everybody. Don't forget to hydrate. Get a good night's sleep. Be well. You're worth it. And I'll see you next time. This is Venus. I can't even say my name tonight. This is Venus Kalita signing off this edition of Tuck In and Chill. See you next time. Sweet dreams.